As we all know, North Dakota State has been destroying the FCS for what seems to be an eternity, going undefeated all the time and winning every championship. In fact, it's no guarantee that Oregon, a top Power 5 school with many 4 and 5-star recruits, gets to walk over North Dakota State in week 1. We also know that North Dakota State has created some really solid players over the years, including Eagles franchise quarterback Carson Wentz. And as great as Wentz is, the next QB coming out of North Dakota State is going to give him a run for his money. His name is Trey Lance, and as of the last few weeks, he's been getting a ton of recognition, even though I was one of the first people to talk about him way back in December. But past that, this QB is such a joy to watch on film, and there's no guarantee I'll like Justin Fields or even Trevor Lawrence more come draft time. Why is he such an exciting prospect, and why does he have a chance at QB1 next year? Well, let me share my scouting report with you and bring you into the Trey Lance fan club. Before I officially get started on the report, I wanted to share how I am going to be grading quarterbacks this year. The algorithm may change, but for the first time ever, I'm going to be using an actual grading system out of 100, rather than just listing a player's positives and negatives or grading some notes out of 5. Some things, such as decision making, are given a much higher total out of 100 than mobility, for example. The grading scale isn't perfect, but it gives you a good idea of what the quarterback is good at and what they can improve on. Before we get started, I did want to mention that my grading scale is harsh, and a grade above 80 is still seen to me as a great prospect. So, starting with Trey Lance, let's grade this potential franchise quarterback. First, let's talk about one of his best traits, his cannon of an arm. He can throw the ball far down the field, but more importantly, he can zip throws into tight spaces with insane velocity. Even on deep throws, where you see the rare requirement of a deep bullet instead of a lob, you can see him throw it with such velocity at such a far distance. Overall, I'm giving it a 4.5 out of 5, which is equivalent to 13.5 out of 15. It's not Josh Allen arm strength, but it's definitely closer to Josh Allen than it is Alex Smith or Teddy Bridgewater. And more importantly, he can make any throw on the field. Next, let's talk about his accuracy. On my grading scale, I didn't just have accuracy as a whole, but instead I cut them into 4 groups: short, middle, deep, and accuracy on the run. His short accuracy deserves a 4.5 out of 5. This is where he's at his best. Not only does he hit his receivers and rarely miss them on short routes, but he's also accurate enough to throw the ball at spots where only the receiver can get it. His medium accuracy is good, but we do see more misses from time to time, often by throwing the ball too high for his receivers. This is why I've decided to give it a 4 out of 5. Overall, it is still great on film, but it isn't perfect. Same goes with his deep accuracy. We see a ton of deep passes from Trey Lance, and most of them seem to go for touchdowns, but we do also see overthrown and underthrown passes. His accuracy is far from a weakness to his game, but it is important to note the occasional misfires from medium and deep range. Moving on to the only trait as important as a quarterback's accuracy is his decision making. If they can't make good decisions with the ball in their hands, they will fail as a quarterback in the NFL. And lucky for us, Trey Lance is at the top of college football with his decision making. He threw 0 interceptions in 2019 and hardly even threw interceptable passes. He's extremely safe with the ball and only turns the ball over on the rare fumble. Like I mentioned earlier, he throws the ball only where receivers can get it. If it's a curl route, we see him pass the ball low and away from the defenders. If he throws a pass up the seams, he throws it high where his big receivers and tight ends can jump and locate the ball in the air. If he is pressured and rolled outside of the pocket, he knows to throw the ball away if he doesn't see a receiver down the field. His decision making is some of the best I've ever seen since I began scouting, and it deserves an amazing 18 out of 20. The only reason it isn't a 20 is because we don't really see Trey Lance pump fake in the pocket. Next, let's look at Trey Lance and his progressions. One small weakness to his game is that there will be times where he locks his eyes on a receiver, but most of the time he keeps his eyes scanning the field, one receiver at a time, and will eventually find the open player. I'm grading it a 3.5 out of 5, and based on my grading scale, It translates to a 5.25 out of 7.5. Also graded out at 7.5 on my scale. Let's look at anticipation next. We see a lot of throws where Trey Lance quickly gets the ball to his receivers during curl routes and out routes. And even though Trey Lance usually gets the ball out of his hands quick, Lance usually does wait to throw to his receivers until they are open. And against weaker competition, his receivers seem to get open quite often. That being said, he does show good anticipation still, and while it doesn't often help his game, it doesn't seem to hurt it either, although that could easily change against the NFL defenses. Overall, his anticipation gets a 2.5 out of 5, which translates to a 3.75 out of 7.5. Also on the grading scale are questions about stepping up in the pocket when pressured and playmaking in the pocket to either keep the play alive or avoid a sack. And Trey Lance simply gets a 4.5 out of 5 or 9 out of 10 for this as well. Every time an edge rusher gets to the outside of the right tackle, we see Trey Lance step up and avoid the sack or the strip. He stands tall in the pocket and we see him being a playmaker all the time. He gets the ball out quick, yes, but on the times he does it, he's good at avoiding sacks and maneuvering around the pocket to extend the play. Next, let's talk about throwing under pressure. This includes accuracy and willingness to take a hit. We don't often see Lance get pressure from defenses, either because he gets the ball out quick or extends the plays, but we don't see his accuracy drop too often against pressure. He isn't afraid to throw the ball either. However, like I said, he doesn't throw the ball against pressure as often as I'd like to see, so he's getting a 4 out of 5 here. Another important trait while scouting a QB is his mechanics. It can decide whether a QB is NFL ready or if he needs to sit for a couple of years behind a veteran. And again, lucky for us, he is definitely NFL ready as a redshirt freshman. His footwork is good and consistent, and he keeps his footwork while on the run so he doesn't ever have to throw off his back foot. He has a quick release and he makes sure to drive through his hips and legs rather than relying on his arm strength. It will occasionally mess up, but I've read scouting reports online that say his mechanics are a weakness and I just don't see it. He's got it down as a redshirt freshman. He gets a 9 out of 10. Lastly, his mobility. Trey Lance is a dual threat quarterback, but he's not a Mike Vick type of dual threat quarterback. While he is a phenomenal runner and he runs hard, he always looks to pass first, and most of his rushing yards come from RPOs or run-designed quarterback draws. He is a passer first with the running ability to make him a serious dual threat option for the NFL. His mobility gets a 4.5 out of 5, with the only reason it not being a 5 is because he's not a juke master like Lamar Jackson. Overall, his grade comes to an 84 out of 100 on my grading scale. He is definitely a first-round quarterback and one of my favorites I have ever scouted. If you haven't watched your own film, I encourage you to. One lucky team is going to get a franchise quarterback, a confident decision maker who could destroy teams as a dual threat, the way Lamar Jackson has for the Baltimore Ravens.